Alrighty, good morning. So today, what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about how to go ahead and do our textures in our collage. So one of the things that we're going to do is get our texture, and we're going to actually put this directly into our Photoshop document. Now, when we've been doing our collaging, we've been taking items and opening them in a new document. But what you're going to do is you will go to, and I'm working on my Mac Photoshop, but you would go to File, Place Embedded to open up your document. Okay, so again, you would go to File up at the top on your Amazon App Stream, go to Place Embedded, and then it'll open up that menu and you'll select your texture. And what'll happen is once your texture goes in, it'll kind of go right on top of your image like so. Now what we're going to do with this is we're going to try to get this to kind of fall into certain spots. I don't just want to take my texture and put it like right here and then just kind of like lower the opacity. That just kind of looks, it looks kind of cheapish. It doesn't look too great. One thing you could do, an option that you have for adding your texture is taking this and obviously making this the size of your document, covering everything. And we learned about layer blending. So what you could do is you could go to this layer blending modes where it says normal, and you could kind of play with this and see if it, gives you any kind of cool effects. But the idea of adding a texture is to use the texture and to see some of the texture. I kind of like that one. That one actually looks pretty cool, that overlay. And then what I could do is reduce that opacity a little bit of it so it's not too harsh. And what's cool is I could also drag this below certain layers, and now it's going to leave, right? Because whatever is below it is what it's affecting. So if you look, it's not affecting my forehead, it's not affecting my eye, because in my layers menu, it is underneath those things. So when we do a layer blend, it only affects the layers below it, which is really cool. So now I'm going to show you, I'm going to go back a little bit here. Boom. I'm going to show you now how to do this to where you can get it just in your facial features that you cut out. Okay? So again, one way is to cover the whole page and use a layer blend, but obviously make sure the texture is not just right, we want to be able to still distinguish some of the items in our page, and we want to be able to distinguish, facial features and such. So one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put this so that it covers my entire face. And then there's a thing that we call a clipping mask. Okay, and I'm just moving things around. So what I'm going to do is if you look here in my layers menu, I have all my facial features lined up together. Now a clipping mask, so I'm going to move this down above my eye layer, okay? A clipping mask will actually clip the photograph just into my eye or whatever layer is below it, right? So if you look, my texture's on top of my eye. If I right click on the layer and I find create clipping mask, there it is, watch. It puts it right over my eye. And then what I could do is I could reduce the opacity of that. And now we're getting that texture inside that eye. You could also now use a layer blend in that shape. So let's go with, let's find one here that kind of works. And certain things might not look great in certain areas. I kind of like that. I like the orange that it brings in. So let's do this now to where it's above my forehead. So I'm going to duplicate my texture layer. And I'm going to drag this above my forehead. I still have that layer blend on, so I'm going to go to normal. And now watch, if I right click on the layer, I go to create clipping mask, it clips it into my forehead. And again, that's a lot of texture there, so I don't want all that. So let's see what it looks like if I just reduce the opacity of the layer. So now you're being able to see some of that texture through that forehead, which is kind of cool. One thing that might also work a little bit better than just reducing the opacity is if we add what we call a layer mask. So if I add a layer mask, now what I can do is take a black, so I'm going to grab a paintbrush with black paint, and I'm going to make this a soft brush. And you'll see I can erase this. And I'm also going to reduce the opacity of this. So now what I'm doing is I'm actually going through and removing some of the heavy areas of that texture so that I can see some of my forehead through that. So that's another way to really kind of create some awesome effects. So maybe I don't want that texture in my hair, so I'm brushing black paint over my hair to create that awesome cracked texture. Okay? So definitely something that you can do. That's another way that you can implement your textures. Again, don't just slap your texture on there and say, well, I added my texture. Part of this is to be able to get this to look somewhat interesting, okay? To look somewhat cool. So again, let's say I like that layer mask feature. So I'm gonna go down here to the bottom. It's a rectangle with a black circle in it. Add layer mask. I go to my swatches and get black paint. I get a soft paintbrush, so I reduce the hardness and I lower the opacity. And now I can come in and just subtly remove some of that texture, some of those items. Alrighty, so that's how we would implement our texture, and that's how we would make it look somewhat blended and what we call cohesive. Okay, so again, using layer blending, clipping masks, or layer masks to create some awesome effects. All right, guys, have fun with this one.